Hey everyone, welcome to ELA Online, lesson number 4 in our drama unit. First thing, I want to highlight some great facts from your web quests. They were so fun. Some key facts about Shakespeare. He was born in England. He was born in 1564. He died on his birthday, we think. Kind of interesting. He was married. He had children. One of his children died very young. That was sad. He wrote tons of plays and poems. In fact, 154 poems and about 40 plays. He had to turn to writing the poems when theaters had to close for a while for the Black Plague. And he built his very own theater. So you found information about this theater. You learned about how they would roll a cannonball back and forth up here to make thunder noises. You learned about how there were trap doors and a secret place in the ceiling and under the floor so that actors could pop out. You learned that audience members would standing room only, all around here in a circle, and that it was a very rowdy atmosphere. They'd be cheering and talking back to the actors, eating, drinking, having fun. It wasn't like a proper formal type experience to go see a play during Shakespeare's times. You learned that he built this himself, and it's called the Globe. You looked into these plague doctors in their special masks, very relatable. You learned about this wild fashion. Look at these pictures. So much look, so much style. And you learned about Queen Elizabeth and how important Queen Elizabeth was. She was this awesome woman queen, and people kept trying to marry her off. They were like, you need a husband to rule the country. And she was like, I do not. And she continued ruling England without any help and sort of played the powerful men of her time against each other in this very clever way so that she could keep power, which was so unusual for that time when it was generally a very sexist time. But she did great things for England. She made it a stronger naval power. She made it a stronger trade power. And she really cared about reading and writing and the arts. And she encouraged Shakespeare, and she even knew him personally, and she would watch his plays. So we also had to kind of be careful not to anger Queen Elizabeth, because if she said no more plays, then that would have been it. So she's very cool and important. Okay, but our main aim for today is for you to be able to interpret Shakespeare's language. And to be able to do that, we need to do some translation practice, and you need to be able to tell the difference between when a character is speaking in poetry and when they're speaking in prose. So the first thing to practice today, a little translation from early modern English to late modern English so that I really know what's going on when I read the play. I'm going to take you through my steps for how I translate in my head or on paper as I read along. So the first thing that I need to do when I'm translating and making sure I understand everything is I need to read slowly and carefully. I want to read fast, but I can't when I'm reading Shakespeare. So here's an example, the Prince Don Pedro from the end of Act 1, Scene 3. He says to Claudio, "Thou wilt be like a lover presently, and tire the hearer with a book of words. If thou dost love fair hero, cherish it, and I will break with her and with her father, and thou shalt have her. Was not to this end that thou beganst to twist so fine a story?" Now, I need to make my word level changes. So I'm literally going to go through and replace individual words that I know are different in late modern English. And some of this becomes automatic and I do it in my head, and some of it I have to think harder about. Turning thou into you is pretty automatic at this point. So I'm going to do all that. Thou is you. Thou is you. Okay. Wilt becomes will. Dust becomes do. Shalt becomes shall. Beganst becomes began. I'm just taking off those early modern English endings. Okay, now I need to substitute some words that have just changed their meaning over time. So I know that when Shakespeare says presently, he really sort of means like soon or right away. So I'm just going to update that. I know what each of these words means individually. They are a little more complex when I think about them as a whole sentence, but I'm not going to do that step yet. I know that break with someone in Shakespeare's time meant to tell them something. And I think have in this case means to marry someone. Okay. Now I'm ready to do step 3. I've updated the individual words, but now I need to update kind of like the overall sentence level meaning. These are my sentence level changes. I need to fix sentence structure. I need to interpret any figurative language to make sure I'm really understanding everything. Okay, so he says, you will be like a lover soon and tire the hearer with a book of words. So that means you'll tire the people around you, like whoever's listening to you. So I might say tire your listeners with a book of words, meaning like you're talking too much. You're going to say too much. So maybe just with too many words. And that's the end of a sentence. If you love fair hero, oh, I know that fair in Shakespeare's time meant beautiful, so that's a word level change I should have made. If you love beautiful hero, cherish it, and I will tell her and her father, and you shall marry her. Okay, that makes sense. Was it not to this end that you began to twist so fine a story? So he's basically saying, like, was it not? Is like, wasn't this why you began to twist so fine a story? Meaning like why you began to tell me all this? Like you began to tell me this story? To tell me this whole story. And now I have a late modern English translation that makes sense to me about what Don Pedro is trying to say. So we're going to have you do this task in your workbook where you'll first read the original slowly and carefully. You'll make your word level changes and you will please highlight them so we can see what you did. And then you'll do finally like a fully updated sentence level change that has the figurative language interpreted in some way and it sounds modern. It sounds like the way we would talk. I have some more translation tips for you here. This is a Bible quote. It's a very famous one about love. It's beautiful. And I chose it because it has all of these verb endings for you that were from Shakespeare's time, the 1600s. So the end of this text says, love rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. So you see that all these verbs that have the subject of love, it, get a th ending. You can almost imagine it's like someone talking with a really corny lisp, right? Th, 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 th. You know that verbs with the subject you, thou, get an st ending. So Claudio says, thou thinkest I am in sport. I pray thee, tell me truly how thou likest her. And I wanted to point out to you that there are some abbreviations that pop up in this text. Ere means before, twas means it was, tis is it is. You'll see some apostrophes where letters have been left out, just like we do in today's English. Here are some more translation tips for you. You can look at these yourself. I just have the early modern English here and then the late modern English here. And I wanted to point out that sometimes part of what's funky about reading Shakespeare's early modern English is the sentence structure. So for example, not is where you least expect it. In Shakespeare's time, they said things like, is she not a modest young lady? That's Claudio talking about Hero. And we would reorder this a little bit. We would say, isn't she a modest young lady? That's how we would say it today. Or, what secret hath held you here that you followed not to Leonato's? Well, we don't say, you followed not. We would say, you didn't follow. You did not follow. And one more thing, you'll see questions in this form. How know you he loves her? That's how do you know he loves her? So sometimes we have to reorder sentences a little bit for it to make sense to us. But it's important to note, Shakespeare can be difficult to read, not just because it's in early modern English, but also because he was writing sometimes in poetry or in verse. So first of all, pause here and try to define prose and verse in your own words. Then I'll show you my definitions. Prose is our regular paragraph writing, like any of the stories that we've read together, sentences and periods. Verse or poetry is our writing with attention to rhythm and syllables, rhyme, poetic techniques, figurative language. 7th graders, you read those novels in verse, so you know all about that. Now, meter might be a new term for many of you, or maybe not for the musicians and poets in the crowd. Meter is our rhythm of syllables in poetry, so the number of syllables, the pattern of loud and soft syllables. That's our meter. So when I'm trying to figure out, Is something written in verse or is it written in prose? This is what I look for. My verse is written with line breaks. The lines tend to be kind of equal length, especially in Shakespeare. I look for rhythm, figurative language, more emotional, and you need to know that in Shakespeare's time, he often made his fancy characters, his very educated, important, royal, noble characters, those were the characters that were more often speaking in verse or poetry. And he made his more simple characters, or his uneducated characters, speak in prose, which looks like normal sentences with periods, punctuation, not so much with the rhythm, no rhyme, less figurative language. So that's how I tell the difference. And in Much Ado About Nothing, he switches back and forth. Some of it is in verse, some of it is in prose. I'd like you to try distinguishing between verse or prose here. So I have an example for you that you can read to yourself and ask yourself, is it verse or is it prose? And then I'll reveal the answer. Pause here and read the text. Okay, this one was poetry. It has the line breaks, it has the rhythm, it has the figurative language, it's emotional, and this is actually a poem written by Shakespeare. It's one of his sonnets. Example number 2, is it verse or is it prose? Pause here to read the text. This one is prose. It's Beatrice from our play, and she's speaking in normal sentences with normal punctuation. So actually, most of Act 1 is written in prose. In fact, I think all of it is written in prose. These characters are just normal people. They're talking to each other in normal sentences. They're chatting, they're bantering, they're teasing, they're talking about what's the news, how'd the war go? So not very poetical, just very normal speech. But then you'll start to see he switches into poetry for some important moments in Act 2. So check that out. Your task in your workbook will be to read some texts and highlight, is it prose or is it verse? It'll look like this. If you'd like to read more about this, we have a great article for you, so you can do that on your own. And 8th grade extension, going a little deeper into Shakespeare's poetry, he used this really special kind of rhythm or meter called iambic pentameter. And we have a video for you about poetry, pentameter, and pirates. That's very fun. And 8th graders, as your extension, you will do a Google form about this information. 7th graders, this is optional for you. 8th graders, it's required for you. Finally, I'd like to announce we loved our ELA Zoom with you this past week. Our next ELA Zoom is Wednesday the 27th. Grade 7 will meet at 9:30 in the morning. Grade 8 will meet at 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. in your 2 halves, and links will be posted day of. Now, we would like you to attend if at all possible, or let us know why you can't be there and what's going on. This is to help you and support you in reading the play and make that a little bit easier. On Wednesday the 27th, we will read aloud Act 2. So as you complete your reading for Tuesday, think about if there's a specific character you would like to act for, and let us know. We want you to sign up for parts if there's a part that's calling to you. And then when we do our acting on the Wednesday, you'll be really prepared and you'll be an expert in whatever that role is. If you don't care what role you are, that's cool too. We can assign roles in the moment. Okay, so now that you've seen today's lesson, your job is to read Act 2 and complete the activities by Tuesday. It's not Monday like normal because Monday is a holiday. So you can click here for a PDF of Act 2. We did the annotations and line numbers for you, and we have some great resources here. We have a character web, we have video summaries of each scene that you can do before or after you read to make sure that you know what's going on. We have audio recordings, we have TV, we have a note catcher for you to take notes. So all kinds of stuff to make this really, really clear and understandable and fun. Here are your characters and how they relate to each other. Don't forget about your summaries. And then finish by doing your workbook questions and clicking Turn In. We can't wait to see you next Wednesday. We hope you're well, and we'll talk to you soon.